welcome to Sonia Podcast. So, Miss Ella, thank you for sending me this. So it says, work as a Wall Street analyst for a long time. He developed a trading strategy unlike anything the world had ever seen before. He used options trading to make bets that highly unlikely events like stock market crashes would happen. Traditionally, investors make projections about stock prices using financial models. The models assume that the company in question will grow at a constant predicament rate. The problem with that is that these models typically base their assumption off of historical data, meaning implicitly they assume that the future will be like the past. But the future probably won't be like the past. We have unpredicted market crashes that everyone say are impossible, like the housing market collapse of 2008. All the time, moreover, the world changed too quickly to use historical data. By the time we can understand the way it works, it doesn't work that way anymore. But most people don't live long enough to see the ebb and flow of history. As a result, we tend to think the world of our childhood will last forever. That goes double for relatively stable societies like the United States, which haven't seen major turbulence in the lifetime of anyone around today. So, with that being said, this world is a deception place, and often it doesn't work the way we think it does. You can't always trust what you learn, and you can't always bank on what you worked for in the past. And then it goes on to say, like the restaurant industry and the human body become better under conditions of turbulence, and this is such an intuitive concept that we didn't even have a word for until now. But in the real, there are actually a bunch of things that gain from this order in the long term from the human body, which responds to some stressors like exercise by getting stronger. To the restaurant industry, when economic turbulence happen, bad restaurants go out of business, improving the industry as a whole. Since humans don't understand that short-term variance can be a good thing, many human systems are designed to minimize short-term variance. But unfortunately, by taking away short-term variance, we often increase the chances of major catastrophe. Think of forest fires, for instance. Once upon a time, we tried to put out every forest fire that we found. But then lots of dead wood accumulated in the forest, leading to major catastrophe fires down the road. Economic systems works the same way. We don't like major price changes, so politicians like to prop up markets in the short term by passing stimulus package and printing money. Unfortunately, this usually just leads to a greater crash down the road. 2 years ago, we printed a ton of money so we could send out stimulus checks, and now we are seeing almost double-digit inflation as a result. The major lesson is if you build a fragile system with one or two major parts of weakness, it will eventually collapse. Think of the Death Star, for instance. So it's a good idea to make any large system redundant, idiot-proof, and flexible and responsible in response to change. When we think of work, we think of shuttle. Work is hard and it's no fun, right? Wrong. For many people, work is one of the major sources of meaning in their lives, and people are often happiest when they are working on something. That's why we have workaholics. The issue is the sort of work that people have done over the past couple centuries just isn't that fulfilling. Take factory work. It sucks the soul out of you. Office work is boring. And working for a large company you don't believe in and that doesn't operate ethically just doesn't sit right. So, the right kind of work, the kind that's meaningful to us, that we constantly improve at, makes us happy. That's why people love games. Game-stimulated work is the right kind of work. We need to make work feel more like a game. Some people think that if you could just retire a private island and sip drinks all day, they'll be happy. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Most people would get bored with nothing to do all day. People who are unemployed are chronically unhappy, and many people, a lot more than you expect, die within 2 years of retirement. So instead of complaining about your job, find work that's meaningful to you. If you don't like your job, it's not because work overall is bad, it's just that you're in the wrong environment. So spend some time finding the right environment. Well, y'all know I have spoken about that myself. Like, find what you're passionate about and do it. Go for what you're passionate about. Go for what makes you happy. Don't stay in no work that's you're unfulfilled, you're unhappy. So she gives me a lot. So this is long, but this is the reason she's telling everyone this is because it's going to benefit a lot of us, and it's going to benefit the upcoming generation. So before the airplanes was invented, scientists from Harvard were spending countless dollars and man-hours researching flying machines. Who would have thought two random weirdos from North Carolina would beat them? Turned out the secret lies in the way the Wright brothers developed their planes. The Harvard research was mostly theoretical. They would design an airplane on paper, obsessing over every little details and trying to make the thing fly in theory. But then they built it, they tried it out, and it wouldn't fly. The Wright brothers came along and they took a different approach. They would build a flying machine as cheaply as possible, test it, and then it would crash. Then they would learn from what went wrong, build another flying machine, and then it would crash. They kept doing this over and over again until eventually they had fixed all the problems and one of their airplanes stayed in the air. We tend to think making mistakes is a bad thing. On the African savannah, when we were evolving, one mistake could mean death. And even today, if you make a big mistake at work that costs your company tons of money, they'll fire you as a scapegoat. So most people try their best to avoid failure. But in the real world, the best way to learn something is to make a mistake. Coming up with a test and then fail. Then come up with a new test and fail again. And keep going until you succeed. Learn as much as you can from each failure. This is a great way to approach building a startup. A startup is a business that aims to do something completely new. What they're saying is like, come up with a hypothesis test, then try it, and then it's going to fail. Then come up with a new hypothesis test, try it, and then again it's going to fail. And that means starting up face a lot of uncertainty. The best way to deal with the uncertainty is to run lots of low-cost experiments so that you can fail, learn, and eventually succeed. So don't be afraid to fail. Low-cost failure is a good thing. And here's the reason why. Because the lessons you learn from are usually more valuable than whatever you lost by failing. As long as your worst case scenario is accepted, taking a risk is usually a great thing. You know how people be like, oh, I don't want to fail. I don't like failing. But taking risks is a very great thing because you learn from your failure. You learn as you're going along. You learn what to do and what not to do. Today we live in a world of nation states. The UN recognized 195 countries, and practically all of the land, territory, and earth outside of Antarctica is claimed by one of those countries. We think that's normal, but actually our current period is a historical outlier. For most of the past 2,000 years, much of the world territory was totally ungoverned. Now, why is that today different? Why is today any different? Because for most of the past 500 years, the available technologies had created a set of incentives that meant nation states made sense. In individual, the logic of violent favors. Nation states government has a lot to gain by conquering as much territory as possible, and it's easy for them to do so, so they do. But that wasn't always the case. The case in point is during the Dark Ages, Europe was incredibly geographically fragmented, and few central governments reigned supreme. This was partially because of the invention of the suit of armor. If you had a suit of armor, a sword, and a horse, there weren't any weapons at the time that could really stop you. That meant it was tough for larger states to form because states depended on the implicit threats of violence to function. But when gunpowder became big in Europe, this flipped the logic of violence on its head. In a world with guns, assembling large armies and conquering large amount of territory is much cheaper. So, James Dale Davis argues that the internet is another world-changing invention. Eventually, it makes the nation state obsolete. That's because it concentrates mostly on the world wealth on the internet and inside people's brain, essentially making capital mobile. Nation state depends upon the predatory taxation of the rich, defined as the taxation far in the excess of the value of goods and service provided by the government. In order to support large militaries and programs by the internet makes predatory taxation impossible. Davidson said, because when capital is mobile, people can choose to live anywhere in the world. They are not tied down to a specific location by their job or by the land they own or by where their factory is located. They can go where they are treated best. So Davidson said that over the coming 100 years or so, nation states will begin to collapse because they simply won't have enough money to keep operating the way they do today. Instead, he imagined a world of small city-states, similar to Italy before 19th century or Singapore today. Now, I don't know if all that will come true or when, but we already seen some movement towards a more servant individual-like world. The pandemic proved that the large-scale remote work is feasible, meaning workers now are no longer tied to their location, and many cities and countries are offering incentives for remote workers to come live within their borders. In addition, more and more people are renouncing their U.S. citizenship, citing high taxes as their reason, and many Western business people now live in tax haven. And increasingly, globalization has led to poor economic condition and resentment among average people in the West. Hence, how politicians like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders shot to popularity with angry radicals, even though just over a decade ago, Barack Obama shot to popularity with a more hopeful message. That the world of the future might be different, but the servant individual convinced me that it will be different over the coming decades. It's likely that large countries like the United States will decline in influence, while smaller countries like Portugal, Singapore, and Turkey will become more important. And people may flee the West en masse, especially if the current trend towards lower freedom continues. So banking on living a traditional life, going to college, getting a job for a big firm, working hard, and climbing the corporate ladder may not make sense. Instead, young people today should learn as much as possible and develop a flexible set of skills so they can readapt themselves to whatever the future holds. So that means back when I was growing up, you wanted to go to college, get a job, work for a big firm, and climb up the corporate ladder. That is no longer what young people need to do. Young people need to learn as much and as possible as much as they can. And they need to develop a flexible set of skills. Like, get as much skill in as you can, and you will be able to readapt to whatever this world gonna have coming for y'all. So we're gonna talk about Sapiens. Sapiens basically a history of all mankind from our early days as proto-humans in Ethiopia to our internet society today, with some speculation about the future as well. Sapiens view humans, in particular the genus Homo sapiens, as a species totally different from every other species on Earth. Only about 100,000 years ago, we were just another animal. But little by little, we are turning ourselves into gods, capable of impacting the climate, traveling to every remote corner of the Earth and even to the moon, building weapons that can annihilate us all, and driving thousands upon thousands of species into extinction. Sapiens looks at the unique element of Homo sapiens that allow us to do all this. It's not just because humans are intelligent. We're also able to believe in myths like religions, money, and human-made entities like countries and limited liability corporations. These myths enable us to cooperate on massive scales. Ants can cooperate with one another, but only if they come from the same colony. But any two humans on the planet can cooperate with one another through trade. And large groups can found bonds based on religion, nationality, even if they are not genetically related to one another. Combine that with intelligence, and you have the makings of a species that can do incredible things on amazing scales. There are no major lessons from Sapien, but it's an earth-shattering... Oh, she's saying it's an earth-shattering book. Read it, make your head explode, because it looks at the world without presupposing a set of values, unlike most books, which sees the world through a Western lens. It's questioning a lot of things that people don't usually question, and says a lot of provocative stuff. It gives you a unique look into how human history works. It may help you better understand the world around you, and it may even help you predict the future. Nobody knows. So, there's usually a better way to do things. People become compulsive due to tradition, laziness, bad bosses, bad incentive structures. But if you're willing to make change and not settle for the status quo, you can find a better way to do whatever you do and achieve a lot more, often in less time. That the whole point of the 4-hour work week inside explained how Tim made more sales working 2 hours a day than his colleagues did working 8 hours a day. And he explained how by making 2 changes, firing 2 of his pain in the ass customers, and empowering his customer service reps to make more decisions on their own, he was able to remove himself from his business and go on an extended trip to Europe. Tim shows you how to escape your 9-to-5 outsource your life, develop a business that feeds you while taking up very little of your time, and go on a spree of many retirement fun adventures in other countries. The lesson is, don't settle for the status quo. Instead, try to level up at what you do. See if you can find a tweak that drastically improves your results, and don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. So she's giving you like a lot of like life lessons, and I'll probably do a part 2 because it's like a lot of life lessons for everyone to take in consideration. So I'm not going to make this one really long. I'll do a part 2 to the rest of what she have given me. But thank you, Miss Ella. And I want to thank you for listening to my podcast. Please give it a 5-star review on Spotify, Speakers, iHeartRadio, Anchors, wherever you listen to podcasts at. Please follow me at SON9795, Instagram, Saint Santiago, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest. You can leave a message here at sv766-752@gmail.com. Please listen to my son Sal's album on Spotify, Apple, where I listen to your music. Follow Sounds on Instagram. Thank you and have a blessed night.